Acting as his own attorney, accused Fort Hood shooter Major Nidal Hasan released a statement today to Fox News. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has details. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, Hasan's statement does not directly address the shooting at the Texas Army base in November 2009, which killed 13 and injured more than 30 others. It claims that the U.S. military is at war with his religion. The statement reads in part, quote, "My complicity was on behalf of a government that only acknowledges that it would hate for the law of Almighty Allah to be the supreme law of the land. Is this a war in Islam? You bet it is. I participated in it." As part of his, quote, "message to the world," Hasan says he regrets his years in the Army as a psychiatrist, claiming that his service was inconsistent with his religious beliefs. Quote, "I would like to begin by repenting to Almighty Allah and apologize to the Mujahideen, the believers and the innocent. I ask for their forgiveness and their prayers. I ask for their forgiveness for participating in the illegal and immoral aggression against Muslims." While Hasan's motivations for releasing the statement are unknown, Fox News has repeatedly requested an interview with Hasan as part of its ongoing reporting on the Fort Hood shooting. It is believed to be the first lengthy statement by the Fort Hood suspect, whose court-martial begins August 6th. George Stratton and his son, who was wounded in the attack, will both testify at the trial. Stratton told Fox he is not surprised by the statement. Quote, "I have all along believed Nidal Hasan to be a Muslim terrorist, so it confirms what I've always thought. I believe that's exactly how he felt when he did what he did. We should take him at his word." If convicted on those 13 counts of premeditated murder and 32 counts of attempted premeditated murder, Hasan faces execution or life in prison without parole. Brett.
Catherine, thank you
very much. Well, investigators say FBI agents did not follow up on warning signs about the accused Fort Hood gunman, a Muslim, because he was politically sensitive. That's the word from a new report on that massacre. U.S. Army Major Nidal Hasan is charged with killing 13 people and wounding more than 30 others in that shooting spree that happened 3 years ago. According to an independent investigation, Major Hasan asked about suicide bombings and killing civilians in emails to the radical American-born cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, and he was al-Qaeda's recruiter. The U.S. droned Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen last year. Catherine Herridge is live in our D.C. newsroom tonight. And Catherine, you've already reported here that the FBI was already investigating al-Awlaki's ties to the 9/11 hijackers.
Well, that's right. As Fox was first to report, Shepard, Anwar al-Awlaki was considered such a threat to U.S. national security that he was part of the President's Daily Brief. That's the highly classified threat assessment in early 2006. Yet despite Hasan's emails to the cleric, the Washington Joint Terrorism Task Force decided not to interview his supervisors, fearing it would hurt his career prospects in the military. On December 17, 2008, 11 months before the shooting, Hasan asked the cleric for advice. Quote, "Some appear to have internal conflicts and have even killed or tried to kill other U.S. soldiers in the name of Islam. Can you make some general comments about Muslims in the U.S. military?" Hasan asked the same question multiple ways over the next 7 months, with the last email to al-Awlaki in June of that year. Al-Awlaki only replied twice, Shepard.
What's the reaction on Capitol Hill there, Catherine?
Well, late tonight, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, who has been briefed on the independent report by Judge William Webster, said the FBI agents threw up unnecessary roadblocks.
They didn't believe certain pieces of information were eligible to be shared for legal reasons, not necessary for any other reason.
And in this 173-page report, parts of which are heavily redacted, there are calls for change to the FBI policy, data management, and training. And though 13 people are dead, this report does not call for any administrative or disciplinary action at the FBI, Shepard.
Catherine Herridge.
He got up, stepped in front of me as I was signing soldiers in.
Sounded like somebody just started yelling out, "Allah Akbar."
Yelled Allah Akbar and started shooting.
Yelled Allah Akbar, which God is great, twice. Reached up on the right side of his ACU top, pulled out his weapon with his right hand, fist and palm, turned the lasers on, pointed the weapon at the other soldiers that were sitting down in the chairs, and he started discharging his weapon inside the building.
Survivors of the Fort Hood shooting recounting the horror of that deadly day. And they are joining with the families of those killed in this new video, calling on the Obama administration to declare the rampage a terror attack. The government classified it as workplace violence, and that means the survivors are ineligible for the Purple Heart, and the families of those who lost their lives are not receiving the same benefits as those killed in combat. Sergeant Alonzo Lunsford was only about 5 feet away when Nidal Hasan opened fire. He was shot 6 times, and he joins us now with some more insight. Thank you so much, first of all, for your service, and secondly, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, ma'am, as well, for having me on the show.
Sergeant Lunsford, tell me where you were when the shooting happened, and walk us through that day and tell us what happened to you.
Absolutely, ma'am. I had just relieved one of my soldiers so they can go eat lunch, and I was at the very front of the SRP building when the shooting happened. Whereas Major Hasan he was sitting to my right, and he walked across in front of me, and he had said something to one of our civilian workers, one of our coders, and after she vacated her workstation, that's when he turned around and he yelled Allahu Akbar twice. And at that time, he was reached up under the right side of his ACU top, and he pulled out the weapon. And when he pulled out his weapon, it wasn't a weapon that normal service members would regularly see. And by him saying Allahu Akbar twice in a loud voice, as if you called a medical building to attention, which you never do, is that everyone was basically stunned. And so when he put the weapon in his right hand, fist and palm, and started pointing it at the other soldier sitting down, discharging his weapon, when he was discharging the weapon, it really didn't sound like you were firing a 9mm or 45 or 38 for that matter. And everybody was kind of stunned and paused for a sec until he started hitting his targets. At that point, I had went to the crouch position behind the partition I was standing behind while I was checking soldiers in. Soldiers that were standing in front of me, everybody dispersed. And we had soldiers coming into the building and going out of the building, the corridor. At which time, that's when one of Dr. Cahill, our civilian PA, had rushed in with a chair, and that's when he discharged his weapon, Dr. Cahill, and he put him down. So I went from the crouch to the prone.
So, Sergeant Lunsford, you saw a colleague get hit right next to you, and then you were hit yourself. Where were you wounded?
Well, my first wound was above my left eye, and the bullet went between my brain and my skull and exited out of my left ear. And then I was hit once more in my back inside of the building while I was laying on the floor trying to crawl behind a desk.
So in all, you were shot 6 times, correct?
Yes.
Now,
yes.
Why do you think, it's been nearly 3 years since this shooting, why should it be declared a terrorist act?
Because that's exactly what it is. And the supporting documents that says it's a terrorist act was one on February 15, 2011. That's when the ticking time bomb report was made public in front of on the Senate floor. The report went out initially on the 19th of November 2009. That's when it was started. And so they finally finished the report, and it came out on the 15th of February. And in the ticking time bomb report, it talked about all of the issues and signs that Major Hasan was displaying when he was at Walter Reed before coming to Fort Hood. Further to support that was when the Webster report came out, and it talked about his emails with Anwar al-Awlaki.
Now, by it not being declared an act of terrorism, that affects you in terms of both benefits and being eligible for the Purple Heart, correct?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And so if it were to change, how would your benefits change?
Well, first, I would be awarded, well, not only myself, but the 14 that were killed that day and the 32 that were wounded, we will all be awarded the Purple Heart. The 14 will be awarded the Purple Heart posthumously, and then our benefits for those of us who are medically retiring or retiring, our benefits would change, which would be for the better.
Now, I want to ask you this question. There's a group that's called the Coalition 160. It started last year. 2 Texas lawmakers, they're backing the group to declare this an act of terrorism. Earlier this month, they wrote a letter to both the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of the Army, and in it they say, it is clear to us that if it were not for what appears to have been political correctness, the Americans killed in this attack and those who are wounded would not still be suffering. Do you believe that this was a matter of political correctness?
I do. I do. At this point, it appears that everything is working in Major Hassan's favor. He's not the victim. We're the victims. And the initial act of how he did the shooting on defenseless, unarmed soldiers, that's a cowardice act. And then for him to do it in the name of Allah, to say that that was his jihad, that's just not correct.
You know, some of the people who recounted what happened that day, they talked about his eyes, and they said they looked like a shark. I know that you're looking forward to seeing him in court. What would you have to say to him?
Well, first I would have to say to him was that myself being North Carolina born, 6 shots didn't put me down that day, because the American spirit, the spirit of a warrior, and being an American soldier would not allow me to die. And so if he really wanted to perform his holy war, just meet me hand in hand straight up, and then we'll see the better man will win. Also, it's the effect that it has on our young people, because every kid wants to be in uniform at one point in their life. And so when they see us in uniform, we're portraying an image of pride. What the American people are built upon, what our country was built upon, is that pride. And for him to have the audacity to don our uniform and to secretly decide that he's going to kill innocent, unarmed soldiers on U.S. soil is just preposterous, and it's sad. And for him to even go as far as wanting to wear a beard for religious beliefs, he didn't have a beard that day. It doesn't make a difference. And I am equally upset with the Department of Defense and with the administration and how it's going, where they're denying us this, and it's like they're tap dancing. Because if you look at it, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it lays an egg, then it's a chicken. But if you hang with champions, the king of the jungle, then you can go forward and you can defeat the enemy. As well as we have eyes on the enemy has eyes on us.
Sergeant Lunsford,
so,
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I, too, am North Carolina born. I'm very proud of you, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. And I know a lot of folks agree with you, certainly. Greg?
Very courageous man, and we appreciate him being with us. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the 13 people who were murdered that day. And the 30 others who managed to survive but were wounded and are still struggling to get their lives back together. And it's an awful thing. Yeah. I suspect that most Americans would be utterly shocked and stunned to regard this as a workplace violence.
Yeah,
when a radical Islamist engages in an act of terror.
Right.
All right.